Greetings, my fellow explorers of all things Jewish. Now that we're back at Parashat Lech Lecha, the Torah portion in which God calls to Abraham to go forth on a great adventure, I wanted to repost my senior sermon from last year in which I addressed this portion and how we all need to step outside of our comfort zone to really grow and then take our lessons back to our community. I hope you'll enjoy the sermon, but also if you want to keep me around as your modern guide to a meaningful Jewish life, please hit subscribe or follow and like this video, and we'll continue the conversation. Here's the sermon. There's this story about a boy who never left his parents' home. Never left what was familiar. A true home buddy, he knew every person in the neighborhood, but not a soul beyond. He joined the family business, and for 75 years, he lived the exact same life. He did get married along the way, but to his half-sister. Talk about an insular upbringing. Well, you might know who I'm talking about. None other than our beloved Abraham. You see, the story of Abraham and the story of our people only truly begins when at the budding, not-so-adolescent age of 75, Abraham finally leaves his birthplace, his kin, his parents' home, when he leaves the familiar and becomes a stranger, when he answers God's call of Lech Lecha, go your own way. Our rabbis emphasize that this was a suggestion, not a command. Rashi explains that God added lahanatcha, uletovatcha. It's for your benefit. It's good for you. Try it. You'll like it. The point is, Abraham could have said no. Instead, he courageously answered the call. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch goes to so far as to say that it was this choice that encapsulates the essential mission of Abraham and all of us who have followed in his faith. Hirsch asks, how could we have survived to this day had we not at the very outset received from Abraham the courage to be a minority? We sometimes call Abraham the first Jew by choice, but that's really not quite accurate. He was a stranger by choice. Walking in this tradition of Abraham, it grants us a license to be different. It bestows nobility on the very experience of being a stranger. It calls us to find our own unique path as a people and as individuals. So I ask my fellow students, and perhaps also teachers and visitors here today, when you first came into this building, didn't you feel like a stranger by choice, unless you're the sixth graders whose teachers made them come? Perhaps you were among the first here of a certain identity. Or perhaps, simply in an era when liberal religion is not quite in vogue, we have felt like strangers because we began walking a path that none of our high school buddies did, none of our college classmates either. Some of our parents' friends, or perhaps our parents themselves, thought this was a strange decision. But we made that decision. And though it might seem like hubris to say so, we did so because we actually thought that we could become a blessing to our people and help our people be a blessing to others. So with Lech Lecha reverberating in our ears, we set out to make ourselves a stranger. Make yourself a stranger. It sounds a bit absurd. Since birth, we've been told to be afraid of strangers. Don't talk to strangers. Strangers are, well, strange. We wouldn't want to be strange. And as we see from Abraham himself, it's often terrifying to be a stranger. You would think that with God's call so explicitly guiding him, the rest of life would just fall into place. But that's not how the Torah tells it. Abraham sets off and in quick succession encounters famine, strife, and repeated moral dilemmas with his relationships to both his wives and both of his sons. And so there's an automatic and frankly understandable response to the fear of looking like a stranger. And that response is to conform completely with the group that's around us. We think to ourselves, if I can just look, talk, and walk like everyone else, I'll be safe. But when we all think like this, how easy it is to ghettoize ourselves, but at a cost. We become unable to interact beyond the ghetto walls. So then we need the courage to continuously step forward into the unknown. We often say that we hope to walk in the footsteps of the greats who came before us. That's really not literally true. Our matriarchs and patriarchs had their Lech Lecha, and we have ours. We can't simply settle for a pre-established track. Unlike that simple pet we probably all had in elementary school, the hamster. I remember being dumbfounded at how this animal was content to just run its wheel for hours every day, but get nowhere. I think it's safe to say that none of us came here to become hamsters. Day after day, to lecture the same lessons, sing the same songs, pray in just one way, stay in just one place. God said, Lech Lecha, get yourself off any such wheel. Get going. Let Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel be one model for how to get going, how to be a stranger. He refused to be bound by any ghetto, a ghetto of place or a ghetto of the mind. Heschel said, when attempting to define the humanity of the individual, the repetitiousness of doing, the stereotypes of speaking, they deprive us of the very dignity of living. The root of creativity is discontent with mere being, with just being around in the world. We humans have this God-given capacity to reject the status quo and seek out a new reality. Jews especially should understand Heschel's insistence on departing from the familiar. What began with Abraham became characteristic of all of Jewish tradition. Avraham was the Ivri, the one from over there. And the central moral of Moses' lifetime is that you shall act justly. Why? Because you were once strangers. The prophets were the quintessential outsiders, and the rabbis, they honored and preserved minority opinions. In the 19th century, it was Reformed Jews that took up this mantle of strangerhood. The Reformers proudly declared, we refuse to stay within the sheltered comforts of the ghetto, and we refuse the invitation to become full insiders of the Western and Christian mainstream. What's perhaps even more significant is how individualistic these reformers were among themselves. In the 19th century alone, Reform rabbis wrote some 100 prayer books, reflecting distinctive theologies and aesthetics. And if you read the editorials from their day, you see genuine, open, and sometimes scathing critique, not just of orthodoxy, but also of their fellow reformers. Our forebears were willing to stand alone. There are no two better examples of this legacy than the founders of our very institution, our rabbis and teachers, Isaac Mayer Wise and Stephen S. Wise. No relation. These leaders boldly crossed boundaries of geography, politics, religious ideology, and Zionist identity. They explored frontiers of possibility. They were willing to take risks and even willing to fail. Both Rabbi Wise and Rabbi Wise aspired to establish the institutions for all of American Jewry. They failed, but they really also succeeded. They laid the foundation for novel scholarship, for an egalitarian Judaism, for an institution that would save European scholars from the Holocaust, including Heschel and Dr. Eric Werner. Werner then founded our School of Sacred Music that would encourage original composition. All of this groundbreaking work by our founders, has made possible the invaluable training of everyone here, 140 years later. And yet, our founders would be the first to say, your training is incomplete if you do not go your own way, if you do not find your own Lech Lecha moments. Are we, each one of us, living up to their model, pursuing our own path, and going off the derech of expectations? If we do so, inevitably there will be bumps in the road. Times when we return from our synagogue internships with the battle scar of a critical comment from our supervising rabbis or our temple president. Let us remember that Isaac Mayer Wise once came back with an actual scar when his first shul president literally punched him in the face. Of course, I hope that none of you experience that kind of criticism, but some level of failure is an inherent part of creativity, of innovation. And so bravery will be demanded of us if we are to explore beyond our borders. Our movement has recently been calling for audacious hospitality, but it's time that we simply become audacious. So Lech Lecha, experience being a stranger in other religious communities. We would have much to learn from a week uptown at JTS, but perhaps there would be even more to gain by venturing even further afield, by engaging with the perspectives, people, and possibilities at Bina's secular yeshiva, or at an Orthodox institution, or even at a Christian or Muslim seminary. Could our administration further help make this a possibility? Could our curriculum have a rubric entitled Lech Lecha, go forth to a land that God will show you? And until it does, we have to make it happen ourselves. Lech Lecha, be an intellectual stranger. Those who allot their precious elective credits on Midrash might try halacha, and those stern halachists among us might rediscover the joy of Midrashim. But even more, we should stretch beyond the official curriculum. Like Heschel, what could we learn from immersion in poetry? Like Mordecai Kaplan, what from sociology? What are the intellectual passions that you once had, but perhaps have neglected while you are here? Pursue them and bring those lessons back into our community. Lech Lecha, Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion. Just as the state of Israel was dubbed the start-up nation economically, we should aspire to become known as the start-up nation religiously. Let us expand our efforts to bring experimentation into our education and technology into our toolkit. Let's build upon the recent innovations of our Tefillah workshop, the BWise Entrepreneurial Fellowship, and the upcoming media and marketing course that Dr. Weiss will pioneer next semester. Lech Lecha, to the professors who honor us daily with your presence and teaching. How do you keep yourself reinvigorated and renewed in a building that you know so well, better than any of us students do? Might you teach an elective outside your discipline, forge a new collaboration with a colleague, or explore a novel approach as you share your scholarship with us? Lech Lecha. Ultimately, Lech Lecha is a call to every single one of us who wishes to lead. It's a call to individuals who do not know the end point of their journey, but still dare to step forward and begin. We commit ourselves to this quest, not just to sing beautiful Jewish music, not just to give a profound Shabbat sermon, and not just to teach a great class on the parashah. Rather, our mission is to find a way forward. Our calling is to continue the journey that began with Abraham and Sarah. Our purpose is to lead our people along paths that await discovery by each one of us who is willing to be a stranger.